Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and before you criticize me for wearing the same outfit that I've worn for the past 2 or 3 videos, it's because I'm trying to knock out several videos on Saturday when I don't have babysitting duties so that I can spread them out in the coming week when I do have babysitting duties, so I can at least keep my channel flowing with new videos. Now, some of the more recent videos that I've been doing have been focusing on Marco Benedetti's Etteilla deck, which is a facsimile deck. And so I did a video showcasing that deck and also speaking a little bit on Etteilla and what he brought to card reading, right? And I also did a comparison video with the Etteilla and other publications that I have of the Etteilla deck. And today I thought it would be interesting to do a comparison between a few cards of the Etteilla deck and a few cards of the Rider-Waite Smith deck, because Etteilla, as I mentioned, was one of the first occultists to come out, and definitely was the first one to come out of the closet and make a tarot card reading a profession, right? And so even though Arthur Edward Waite Smith was also an occultist, there was a little bit of time between the two gentlemen, and by then, maybe the occultists of the 1900s, such as Arthur Edward Waite Smith, I'm going to just call it Rider-Waite Smith deck, but by the time Rider-Waite Smith deck came out, they may have tweaked it and applied their own meanings to the cards. I think some of the occultists, when they came out with their own decks, poo-pooed a lot of what Etteilla did because maybe they thought he was naive or whatever. But I want to show how some of the meanings that they applied to their cards, or at least that are depicted in their pictures, owe a lot to him. Not all, there's some differences, but I think some of them do owe something to him in their interpretation of certain cards. And certainly even modern day readers, there's certain cards that we still adhere to Etteilla's meanings. Now, where did Etteilla learn his meanings? Well, he had that whole Egyptian thing, that whole fantasy or that whole mythology about the cards being sourced from Egypt and being a book that was handed down with the secrets of the universe or whatever. But I think he also, was aware of Italians who were reading the cards, or maybe some little old French ladies who were reading the cards, or and I think he probably learned some of the meanings of certain cards from other sources. Anyway, let me flip the camera, and I have chosen a few random cards from the Etteilla and to coincide with the same cards from a Rider-Waite Smith deck to see how much the Rider-Waite Smith deck owes to the Etteilla card meanings. Okay, as I mentioned, I'm using the Marco Benedetti facsimile Etteilla deck, and I'm using the 1910 Crackleback published by Conrad Steyn through MakePlayingCards.com. Now, I also have the 1909 Lilies and Roses back, but I decided to use this one because of the two, I think Arthur Edward Waite would have preferred. I mean, he obviously, after the 1909 deck, he pulled that deck and he replaced it within 3 or 6 months or something like that with a new deck in 1910 with new colors. So I'm honoring his wish for me to use the deck that he would have probably preferred I use. Okay, so for the first card, we have Etteilla's Fool card. The word, I believe, translates to madman, and we have someone who's a bit disheveled, as we might have seen in the tradition of the early Italian decks, and also in the tradition of the Tarot of Marseille decks. But with the Rider-Waite Smith deck, we see, probably a youth of affluence. He's not in tatters at all. He's carefree. This guy looks like he's really got the weight of the world on his shoulders, and this one is about to fall off a cliff and could care less. So we do see a difference in attitude of both of these cards, right? I mean, some of the imagery is the same. You know, we have a wanderer, we have somebody with a knapsack, we have somebody with a dog, but this dog is more of a play pal, you know, who's just as carefree as this guy, whereas this one might be biting him, or not so much a companion as a dog that's saying, you better get off my territory or I'll bite you. Now, with the number 2, 3, 4, and 5 cards of a regular tarot deck, in history, we've seen that those cards, you know, the female pope, the empress, the emperor, and the pope card, if any 4 cards in a tarot deck have been played with or changed, it's those 4 cards. You know, we see it in the Besançon, where we have Juno and Jupiter, right? We see it in the Bolognese cards, where we have the 4 Moors in place of the, you know, the female pope, the empress, the emperor, and the pope, and so with, you know, Etteilla, it seems as though he played with the order. So I've put both these decks in the order that Etteilla put his deck in. But the 2, 3, 4, 5 cards that we're accustomed to seeing in that order in, you know, typical tarot decks, he doesn't have it in that order. So for the number 2 card, or for the number 1 card, actually, the card after the Fool card, he has a male querent card. So this card would represent the male querent, you know, the male seeker. So I think, because we don't, in the Etteilla deck, we don't have those 4 cards. We don't have the female pope, we don't have the empress, we don't have the male pope, and we don't have the emperor. So I'm assuming or thinking that the cards it replaced would have been one of those 4 cards. So for the male querent, it's either the pope or the emperor. But I've chosen the pope for this one, and I'll show you why when I get to the emperor. I mean, you know, if the querent is a male and he's coming for enlightenment, you know, we have a sun cracking through the clouds, right? So he's looking for enlightenment. And so I think that more closely resembles the pope than it might the emperor. Okay, next in order and sequence on the number 2 card, we have this word, which I think suggests enlightenment, right? Now, what similarity do we have by the time Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Colman Smith decided to design the card? Well, in keeping with Tarot of Marseille, we have 2 young people with some kind of structure in the background, or a wall, right? And then we have the sun and the sky. So we have a youth, a singular youth. It's on a horse, but this image could lend itself to prior historic decks, even prior to the Etteilla deck. We do have a wall, like a walled garden. We have flowers, which don't really appear, but if it's a walled garden, it would have flowers. And then we have the sun. So in a sense, we could say that both of these have similar meaning of enlightenment. Now, the word propose, I looked it up and it means about, so I'm sure that there's something lost in translation. Now, I'm sure that this card represents what we call the moon card. I think U means water, which we definitely see reference to in the moon, you know, with the tides of the, you know, the way the water is affected by the moon in the tides. And we have many of the same ingredients. We have 2 dogs, we have a crustacean, we have 2 towers, and we have a moon. Now, I don't know what propos meant. As I mentioned, I only translate it to about, so I'm sure I lost something in translation. But, you know, it has the look that we have given the moon card of mystery, of, you know, things not being as apparent as things are in the day, maybe things that are done in secret. In fact, I think it conveys that feeling better in this card than this card. Because if it wasn't for the name, you might think this was happening in broad daylight, really. The sky isn't dark. Okay, we have the Star card. Now, I think dépouillement, when I translated it with my little Google Translate, it came out to counting. Counting. So I'm not really sure what meaning we are to infer from that. But I think with the Star card, most of us think of the star as a star, a card of enlightenment, of, similar to the sun, perhaps. Also a card of opportunity and hoping and wishfulness, wishful thinking. I'm not really sure what the context of dépouillement meant besides counting. And we see the assignation of air for the Star card, which I think the more modern occultists applied to the Star card. So they took that attribute from him, whether they criticized him or not. Okay, we have the World card. Voyage, maybe trips, traveling, earth, land, right? Now, this card kind of suggests something else. It doesn't necessarily suggest the practicality of, material things. It kind of elevates it to the manifestation of all things, the manifestation of perhaps spiritual aspirations as well as material things. But here it kind of seems like it's more grounded with matters of the earth. Okay, here's the other one that I'm not really sure how it would have translated to. Now this was, okay, this one is day and night. And we don't really have a day and night card in the more typical tarot decks. So the only one I could think that it might have applied to was the Empress, and I don't know why. It may not have any connection at all to the Empress card. It's just, he decided not to have an Empress card and he replaced it with this card. Now, the reason I chose the Emperor card for whatever Afui means, or I see the word protection, and of all the cards that were not included in this deck is in the Rider-Waite Smith deck, I think the Emperor is the closest to a protector. So I chose that. And for the female querent, who was looking for enlightenment through the use of the cards, I figured that the female Pope or the High Priestess would be the closest to that. But as I said, all the cards that I've compared with the Etteilla in place of the female Pope, the Empress, the Emperor, and the Pope, I don't really know if I properly assigned them to one another. These are now more easily understood. We have Justice. I'm just showing all the higher order cards. We have Temperance, and I've put the cards in the order that Etteilla had them, and he completely restructured, the order of the higher order cards, or the Triumph cards. Here we have Force or Strength. Now here, they're just sort of chilling with one another as though the lion is a pet. The woman is not imposing any kind of will on the lion at all. Whereas, with the Rider-Waite Smith deck, there seems to be some type of will being put upon the lion by the woman. There is no Hanged Man card in the Etteilla. However, I do believe that Prudence replaced the Hanged Man. I think they felt, some of the occultists felt, that the snake or the rope in the hanged man was really a snake, and that you see the posture of one leg bent was just the person kind of going, ooh. And, remember that the occultists completely disregarded that the tarot deck was created in Italy. The game of tarot was an Italian invention, because they either completely ignored it or were completely unfamiliar with that fact. And they went with their fantasy mythology that, the deck came from ancient Egypt and was the Book of Thoth, with all the mysteries and secrets of the universe contained within a 78 card deck of cards. And the objective was to correct the corruption of the TDM deck, which was the deck that the French were familiar with. So they felt that the Hanged Man was a corruption of what was really intended, which was prudence, or the image of a woman walking and avoiding a snake or stepping on a snake or whatever. Okay, we have the Lover card, which Etteilla attributed to marriage or union. And we do see that in modern interpretations of this card. Adam and Eve could be suggestive of the TDM tendency sometimes to see the Lover's card as a choice, because after all, Adam and Eve made a choice, right, with the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. So whereas Etteilla and some of the older Italian decks, I think, saw the Lover card as symbolic of a union or a bond or a legal bond or a marriage between individuals. The occultists, saw it as maybe that, but also having some other attributes such as choice. And, in this card, it almost looks like that, the officiant, of course, is, officiating the ceremony, or perhaps that they're getting permission from the authorities or from the magistrate or whoever was the one who said, yeah, you're allowed to get married. I mean, even today, we have to apply for a marriage license. We don't just say we're married. We have to apply and go through a procedure. Okay, we have force majeure for the Devil card. And we can see clearly where this image was taken. Now, the Magician card is called Malady, which to me suggests something that's probably not great, unless I've completely misunderstood what that word means. But you see, the occultist or Rider-Waite-Smith deck, at least, has elevated the Magician to a magus, right? Somebody who has all these kinds of powers. But really, he's only number one. So it's kind of like in my view, I don't see the Magician as that kind of a powerful person, because he's only number one. He's the least of the numeric cards. He's the least respected or valued individual in a deck of in the Triumph pack, right? He's only number one. He's only one step above the curb, which is the Fool, right? So the Magician in traditional, the way I read the cards from the older decks, it's just like a con man, a street vendor, a hustler. But here he's different. They've elevated him. So I'm not really sure what Etteilla had in mind. Let me pull a cheat sheet that I have for this card and see if they gel. Okay, so according to my cheat sheet, which was published by Lo Scarabeo, the number 15 card is Malady, which reads, overcome the illness and sorrows that have befallen you. So I guess in a way, it suggests that you can overcome whatever maladies occur, which I guess loosely can mean similarly, but it's almost like this guy has like so many supernatural powers that, okay, You know what? Let me check up what propos meant. Let's see what card was propos. That was number 3. And okay, number 3, propos, according to the cheat sheet, meant the heart of the matter. So for the moon card, it meant the heart of the matter. Oh. You know, sometimes the heart of a matter can be deeply buried, right? Alrighty, here we have judgment, which is, I think, self-explanatory. And they have similar images. I am not sure if this person is ascending from the grave, but this person is kind of in a shroud and part of the earth, maybe arising. Yeah, could be. And death, we all understand what that means. And according to the cheat sheet, it means death comes to all of us, so make your peace. Now we have the Traitor card, which is kind of strange. Go against the status quo. Now, that kind of meaning really kind of goes with the Fool card better than it does with the Hermit, doesn't it? But by the time you're old, you kind of do your own thing and you kind of don't give a rat's ass about it, you know? I mean, I know that's how I feel. I mean, I definitely want to be acceptable in polite society and be, you know, somebody who does good things. And I don't want to be somebody who disregards other human beings. That's not how I live my life, you know? But, you know, there are certain things that I could give a rat's ass about as I've gotten older, whereas when I was younger, you know, I was much more concerned about fitting in, you know. And now I kind of just wear my age as a badge of honor. Do what the heck I want to do, you know. And I'm a person who's reasonable. I'm not going to do things that are bad for society. I tend to stay in my own lane and do my own thing. Okay, here we have the Tower and Misery. And according to the cheat sheet, it suggests that a negative situation brings disaster. And we could clearly see that sentiment was carried over into this card. Okay, we have the Wheel of Fortune, which in Etteilla's deck is number 20. Take charge of your affluence or be ruled by it. And we have a little bit of a difference here where we just have, you know, luck will change, or what goes around kind of comes around kind of thing. It depends on how, you know, in the context of a question, how you might interpret the Wheel of Fortune. Okay, now the last card of the higher order is the Chariot. Now recall, you know, it's not that I put these cards in a random order. I put these cards in the exact order that Etteilla did. So he rearranged the order of the cards that we're accustomed to seeing them in. And 21, the cheat sheet says, be aware of the forces moving against you. Whereas we tend to see, I think I do at least, and, you know, especially since I look at the earlier Italian decks for my inspiration for origin stories, right, as advancement or, you know, a virtue, you know, somebody who is virtuous or who has accomplished something or who is ambitious. And I don't see that meaning here, but I do see it here to some degree. Okay, now, I just chose a few random pip cards. And this one interested me because the Four of Cups is described as ennui, boredom, right? Now, isn't that what we have depicted here? This guy has 3 cups. He's being offered something else in addition, but he could care less. So I think you know, Rider-Waite Smith definitely borrowed from Etteilla here, or Pamela Colman Smith did with the ennui. Okay, now with this card, we have victory, the wish fulfillment card, right? It means like, yeah, you'll be successful. And here we have kind of like a Falstaff, you know, individual from Shakespeare, which I think kind of portrays in the context of the card and what it reflects, kind of, you know, suggests the same thing. Being satiated with, you know, being satiated with what fulfills you. Now, I thought this was interesting. This card, ecclesiastique, which I think means, you know, ecclesiastical, and, you know, it seems like an obvious reference to, you know, religious, particularly Christian doctrine. So, and this is 9 of Swords. This is 8. Here we go, 9 of Swords right here. So I'm not really sure of that you know, I'm not really sure that these two share anything in common. It's like more of like religious doctrine or religious references, where here we have a very heartbroken, tragic, you know, moment of the heart, like your worst nightmare kind of image, right? Okay, here we have critique for 8 swords. And we have 8 swords here. So I imagine maybe, you know, if somebody's been criticized, they kind of feel like they've been persecuted. I guess there could be kind of a connection between these meanings. I'm picking a lot of the 9s, if you'll notice. Okay, retard, which I think probably means a delay or slowing something down. And here we have a pause. You know, I think we see that here, right? There's a pause in action. So I think we see it. I think we see a similar thing going on. Okay, we have 10. What is this? 10. Oh, 10 swords. 10 swords. Ah, maybe I pulled the 9 because I thought it probably better suited the 10 swords in the Rider-Waite Smith deck seems to be more of the 9 swords. So maybe, you know, the 10 swords doesn't, whatever the 10 swords was, you know, the card that looks like put a fork in it, right? I didn't pull it, but, you know, you can visualize what I'm talking about, you know, like the person who's like stabbed to death, right? That says tears. Well, I think this card represents this as well. Tears, right? I mean, this is like tears. The 10 of Swords of the Rider-Waite Smith deck is beyond tears. I mean, like I said, put a fork in it. Let me pull it. Right? I mean, the 10 of Swords is beyond tears. We're past crying. It's done, you know. It happened, and, you know, we have to pick up the pieces and move forward. I mean, this situation doesn't necessarily mean a tragedy of this magnitude unless you have cards like the Death card and the Tower card, etc. But if in the context of the question, if we're just talking about, well, I get a job and you see this, and it's like, well, you'll probably be defeated by someone else who has better credentials or whatever. You just kind of like move on, you know. So it doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. And if you have you know, if you see the suit of swords as, you know, authority or legal matters or whatever, it could just mean that the legal matter can come to an end, or it will come to a conclusion soon. Now, this card suggests that it won't be a fortuitous end for you, you know, if you're the one who's involved in the legal matter. But if you use this, you know, like a TDM or an Italian version, and you see 10 swords, it can say something will come to a conclusion. It's time to start over, or it's time to move forward, right? Without the doom and gloom reference. Okay. Now we have 10 cups, which says the town. It you know, the upright position I'm looking at kind of means the town. We're here at the 10 cups. You know, kind of more shows a home. happiness or fulfillment of the home rather than representing a town. Although we have a glimpse of a home, in society. Here we have 10 coins, the home, the mansion, or the estate, right? And we definitely see that here. So we definitely see a borrowing from Etteilla here in the Rider-Waite-Smith. This one, I think that's a 7, 2, 4, 6, 7 coins. Argent, I think it translates as money. I think it does. And here we have 7 coins or 7 pentacles. But we see this guy here with like a sickle. So like he worked hard for his money. I think that's the implication here. And I think that's kind of the implication here too. He's worked hard. He's worked hard at achieving something. And I guess the suggestion could be that he expects reward, the fruits of his own labor. So even though the more modern day occultists poo-pooed Etteilla, I think, and these are just a handful of cards. I mean, I didn't do every single card. I just did the higher order cards, the Triumph cards, and just a handful of the pip cards to compare to the Etteilla. But I think there's enough to suggest that, as much as they criticized Etteilla for being naive or foolish or not understanding the meaning of the cards, they borrowed enough from him. And to this day, many of us, including myself, still use some of the meanings that Etteilla applied to his cards. I just thought that would be an interesting video. I hope you agree. Please like, subscribe, share my content. I'm hoping to keep this a free channel, and I like to share information. And if you agree, please support me by doing those things. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.